founders are now trying to really understand what influences people to buy the things they buy. It's changed so dramatically from, I think, a world of like seeing a couple products on TV stand out to like this massive influx of like getting hit left and right by 50 different products in the same exact category and lane. And I think that's when you have to, as a founder, have to start thinking about what are the unique opportunities to show up in a way that breaks through the clutter and the noise. And I think the brands that are doing it well understand that they have to be everywhere, right? But in a very unique way. And what I mean by that is you're going to be using the channels that are very templatized and known to known to work and to just provide return. That's the simple shit. Pull the digital media buying, put money behind micro influencers, put money behind things that are working well in paid media, and just continue to manage those profitably, which is a template, right? And then I think the X factor is how do you show up in the other places of influence to the daily consumer? And what are those places? And I love that like strategy work around what are those places of influence. The one that's never died, in my opinion, is word of mouth. Where does the genesis of word of mouth start, right? Who's that first? Because sometimes it's like a puzzle. Like you have to like reverse engineer. But the first person that's a believer, if the product's built to really satisfy the customer, will typically tell the next customer. And that's the early stages of word of mouth. And then so if it's like a wellness powder that you can take every day, pretty easy to like have a word of mouth referral on that. It's much harder to do that for like a car because people aren't buying cars every day, right? So I think when you have a product such as a daily supplement or a beauty product or something that's like low cost of switching, because a lot of people have their current routines and it takes a switching cost to change what you're currently doing. So I think when you have a low cost of switching, like, hey, when this runs out, I'll try something new. Like those products are highly in, influenced or influenceable, if that's a word. And so I think getting in front of a strategy where how can you get more people talking about your brand, and because that inherent trust in someone saying use this is like just the most powerful recommendation and source of credibility for brand. Even for our business at platform, like word of mouth referrals are the warmest, they're the strongest, and it means someone who was typically unbiased really vouches for what you're doing and what you're building and the product you're selling. And so I think a way that I think about, and founders, I think many of them think about creating a better environment for word of mouth virality and referrals is community events. I think we're going back to a place, and I talked about this on the last episode, is back to a place where bringing people together for a reason or a certain value that the brand stands for. So let's just say it's a hydration drink and you want to be at a run club. And this actually, we have a brand called Cadence, which is a great sports hydration, ready to drink brand. And, the founder was telling me that he spends a lot of his time curating community events around run clubs and people who are super, passionate about running, because the byproduct of that is people get thirsty. They need to hydrate. And so, what better place to be than a place where people actually need your product? They drink it, and then they can actually share how great it was to the other people that are also doing it. I think that that's like a perfect place to like light the fire of like virality for word of mouth. And so I think that's one really, really strong channel in terms of influence when you think about the ways people are thinking about brands, is how do you get in front of communities that have the same value system or same belief, where everyone is sharing excitement around the same thing and placing your product right in the center of that, because then they have something exciting to share, they have something exciting to talk about. And emotions are high when you're all high-fiving about something you just accomplished, whether it's a run or if it's a beauty tutorial or whatever it is. You're bringing people together for this one common reason, and then when they can activate that through a product, there's a lot to share there. So I think word of mouth is still one of my favorite avenues for customer acquisition, because I think it's true and tried. It'll never go away, and it is the most authentic review that someone can give about your product, is sharing it and telling someone else to buy it. I mean, that's the epitome of an influencer. The reason I meant having your brand in an environment where there is an experience is because people like to share experiences more than they may like to share a transactional recommendation. Here's a good example, like the Aero company that does the shuttle flights from LA to Aspen. Obviously, wearing a different lens here because it's not like a consumer product good, but the experience that they gave me around that flight, which was providing things that were already very relevant to their core customer, like Erewhon meals or healthy meals or having green juices in the waiting room, or like Wally's wine in the waiting room versus your typical like Starbucks machine. I think that that makes a huge impact because that's they are feeding me inherently a story to share. And obviously, I don't know if that's manufactured purposely or not, but if it is, good on them. If it's not, like also good on them because it's even more authentic. But they've clearly thought about a strategy where you can give someone enough of an experience for them to go home and share it. And I think that's the same thing I was talking about with like run clubs. Like, and I'm not, I've never done one, but I can only imagine that you're doing something that's so exciting that you're going to go home and share it with your significant other and say, "Oh, I just accomplished this like 10K, and they had this dope product there that we were drinking, blah blah blah." So it's very similar to the Arrow situation where you literally will go and share that with the next person that's open to listening to it, right? And you're like, "Wow, like if you ever travel to Aspen or any of these like cool unique locations that may be hard to get to on a commercial flight, use Arrow. It's sick." Like, and then as soon as you say it's sick, you're literally going to talk about those two or three unique points. You're not going to be like, "Oh, it's sick. The plane flew at 500 miles per hour." You're going to say, "Oh, it's sick. They had Starlink. I could FaceTime my wife." Like, that's really cool. Or hey, it was sick. They had a green juice, and typically I'm never hydrated or nourished before a flight. So it's all of those little points where they're just feeding you perfectly. And if you're a brand or a founder, like that's what I was, and I don't have a physical brand, but typically when we strategize with founders, we have that lens on where we're thinking, how are you just giving them what they need so that they can share it and be an extension of your brand? The consumer should be an extension of your brand. And that's the whole thing with word of mouth referrals, right? You're just literally creating an army of ambassadors that can hopefully speak to your product just as well as you can because they are experiencing it. And so, um, back to like just a health supplement thing, it's like, oh, I felt like this right after. Or hey, I put this cream on and I felt energized right after. I felt the electricity of the cream really working or being functional. So anything you could feed intentionally that evokes, I think, some sort of like sensory experience or some sort of whether it's visual, again, visual, taste, smell, sound, whatever that may be, that's the stuff that's memorable. That's the stuff that's going to be able to share because they're not, again, going to come back and say, yeah, this was just a better deodorant or a better thing. It's like, oh, it smelled like the Amazon forest. They're feeding you with something to share. So if you don't have those bites that you're feeding someone to share, then it's going to be really difficult to create virality or some sort of a word of mouth roadmap for your customer. So that's one channel of influence. I think the other ways that people are being influenced is, fortunately or unfortunately, I think digital is so important. So we can jump there for a second. But I think the world of TikTok, and I know we're kind of behind the curve in a way of like this has been happening for a while, but so many people don't understand how impactful it is, and so many brands don't understand how impactful it is. Like some of the best brands we manage just so deeply understand TikTok and the algorithm and what makes things stick and how they can reach so many more consumers. Um, we have multiple brands right now that are just selling millions of dollars worth of product on TikTok Shop. And the TikTok obviously just came back. I mean, there was the brief ban, and people were scared, but I think they were scared because they realized the potential of what can be had on TikTok Shop. I mean, you have a platform where literally you're taking out the friction point of seeing or being influenced and then having to go purchase something. They're doing it all in one. So imagine the taking out a friction point is like taking out so many points of conversion that usually it takes for someone to buy your product. So the easier you can make it from going to influence to commerce or content to commerce is is brilliant in so many ways, right? Because you that's the bridge to cross for most brands. Someone sees a piece of content, hopefully they're influenced to buy this product. And TikTok's just making it so that the place where you are seeing the content, you're buying the product. And that's a really, really powerful bridge to put together, because that for the last 10 years has been the most difficult part about e-commerce, is like you see their product elsewhere and then you have to go find them and buy them. And then, I think one thing that goes undervalued too is like, and maybe not to some people, but I think it's undervalued, is sampling. And the power of trying the brand. And I think Erewhon does a great job. There's some other retailers do a really good job of putting out samples and creating an experience around sampling. But whether it's at the retail store or even at experiential events, some of the best brands that I've bought that have worked the most have been through experiential sampling. And I think that's so potentially undervalued. And again, it depends on how much you can afford to sample. Some brands that are early on, they can't just afford to just put millions of dollars worth of product out in the open just for the hopes that people will try it and come back to buy it, because it costs a lot of money to do that, obviously. But I think if you can afford it and it fits into the marketing plan and budget, that's a great place to bridge content and commerce, or influence and commerce, because the influence is happening at the event. And if you can convert someone at the event based on them trying your product, amazing. Like that's how you're going to buy in the customer. And because we have a world of so many new products coming out so often, being able to taste and buy and have that sensory experience is invaluable. It's making sure that brands who have a really, really, I don't want to use the word, overuse the word authentic, but it's like the best word to describe this, an authentic story and a really, really functional product that actually works. I think the brands that have that going for them, the brands that their core customer loves and they're looking to expand, or their core marketing just connects with customers so well and they want to just scale it out, those are the brands that are doing themselves a disservice by not being on the platform, because education is so important. Like, talk about points of influence. Like, in my personal opinion, and I've seen this within case studies, but my personal opinion is that education is the best form of influence for me, and for, hopefully, I think a lot of people who are trying to share authentic learning. So like a good example is like this one ingredient does this, and it's real, it's authentic, it's not like a hoax. Like, there's case studies proving it, maybe there's some heritage around it. Like, use the example of like turmeric in India. It's been proven to be super anti-inflammatory, all these things, and over time those things just stand the test of time because so many people have it's tried and true. So when you have a story like that and you've built a product around something that has some heritage and legacy claims around it that stand true over time, you're doing yourself a disservice by not sharing that story more. And the people gravitate towards amazing stories. When you hear something like that, you want to go buy. I mean, that's why influencers do what they do. They're sharing stories and then just placing the product in. And so I think, again, if you have that type of a brand and you're based foundationally on a product that just really works well, or it's functional, like, you have the best chance of capturing an audience to convert on a TikTok or any format that's social that allows people to ingest that education. Because I think the one thing we're missing today is like the information changes so often. There's so much more available information every day. Like in school, you just learn about certain subjects and you're not learning about what turmeric powder does for your body, right? But there's so many unique cases of that, which will relate to some audience. Turmeric is anti-inflammatory, or collagen is better for your hair, skin, and nails, or colostrum does, this for your immune system. Like, once those connections are true and tried, there's going to be an audience for each one of those connections. And the only way to get to that audience is through education, because most people don't even know that that's happening. Like, my parents are really good avatar for this where they're having their, natural problems at a certain age, right? Like hair loss, whatever it is. It's all just natural from going through the human experience over time. And they're just not educated on some of these single ingredient things. And yes, they can be manipulated at times for into buying things that may not be effective. But I think the optimist in me sees that there's an opportunity for brands that are trying to do well by their customer to really reach people like my parents who are not going to be reached by maybe your like big macro influencers. Like they're going to be reached by maybe some, Indian guy going to the store and being like, "Oh man, I found turmeric and look, and now it's here, and you should use it because it's going to help your, joints." Some shit like that. Like truly, that's what would work for them. And I think it's funny because I'm now thinking about like my mom DMing me some of these, and there's some hilarious Indian accents that I've seen that she sent me that people finding things at a store where they're like, "Wow, this works," and that's her influencer. That local Indian guy that went to a store is her influencer, and it just shows me that there's so much power in education. Who educates you also super important. So the who is really important. So if you're going after a target audience like my parents, are you picking someone who they're not able to relate to? That's not really going to work with them. So can you diversify the who within this macro strategy of using education and influencers? Can you diversify to finding the lookalikes that would relate to my parents? That goes more into caring about your customer because in finance, they used to call it like KYC, like know your customer. And that was more for the financial side, like know that they're able to invest. But that applies also to like CPG brands where know your customer. If you're trying to penetrate this avatar, this subset, this ecosystem of people, go talk to them. Who are they think? Like I always ask. Most of the time, whenever I meet people, when I'm in like the work mindset and have my like curiosity hat on, I'm trying to think about who are the people that influence you. Who do you listen to? Is it your doctor? Is it your mechanic? Is it your lawyer? Is it the Indian guy at the grocery store? Like, and pick that avatar for that community. At the highest level, that looks like Jake at State Farm or Jake from State Farm, whatever his avatar is. But on the micro level, you have to divvy that up into figuring out who connects with which audience because you're not going to get a blanket connector because connection is so unique based on the person and what they believe in. But yeah, I think that's one way to really get to that core customer. So national awareness is so complementary to local awareness. And I think it's an interesting point to think about because a lot of this goes into more of the conversations we have with founders around brand launches. So this is actually an interesting topic where people and founders of all shapes and sizes, second time around founders, first time around founders, they come to us, in ideation phase sometimes, and sometimes a little later, like the product's already in one, on D2C or in one retailer. But we always get this interesting template to work with, which is usually someone's coming to the table saying like, "Hey, we have this amazing celebrity that has national awareness and they can launch a campaign and everyone will be talking about it the next day." Well, is that actually going to drive sales? The opposite is, "Hey, I just want to go to my local bodega and just sell there," until every person around that radius of the local bodega knows my brand and is drinking it or eating it. And they're two very different approaches to brand building. Like the first being national and just like let's use the biggest possible avatar, celebrity, influencer to just use the blanket awareness. You see guys like Jake Paul doing this, the Kardashians have done it well. There are people that have done it really well. Some of our clients like Mari at Bloom, a great example, is she's done a tremendous job of that on the mass scale. Mr. Beast, Feastables, tremendous job to be able to convert in a national way. But then there's people who really struggle, and I think that goes into really understanding my point earlier, which is what type of content actually converts and is the celebrity actually authentic enough and involved enough to make the conversion. And that goes back into like doing an exercise and taking inventory from a data perspective of like, hey, when this athlete that you want to use posts, like, are people actually engaged? Are they actually talking about, or is it just like dope, sick, like whatever? Like, is it just commentary or likes, or is it actually like wow, thank you for sharing. Like that was so helpful. That's when you can start having discernment around the type of celebrity or athlete or national campaign that you're using. Because if you're leaning on someone who may have amazing national presence or any sort of coattail, it doesn't have to be like a celebrity, it could be anything that you're partnering with that has national awareness. Like, how much can that national awareness actually convert? And a lot of times you see us telling brands to kind of not leverage that person till later, because the other side of the coin also is distribution. So if you have a national campaign and you're like, yeah, we're going to launch full, US campaign around this avatar that we have that's going to represent the brand, but wait, my product's not available in stores across the country. It's only available in one region. So there's the other side of the coin too, is like, when do you actually want to execute or turn on the national awareness? And typically that's why you always see brands like, until they're not in full retail, which means like really across the board, Target, Walmart, Costco, Amazon, etc. You don't want to really go live with a national campaign or a broad blanket awareness game, because people aren't going to be able to purchase your product. Then they'll go to Target and be disappointed that they're not able to find you there, and then that goes into a whole nother, pigeonhole of like disappointing the customer. And then you have holes in your attribution to the media campaign because people literally can't find your product, and that's going to cause a lot of friction in that journey. So we always try to say like, meet the demand wherever it is first. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand how much influence the person or the campaign you're leaning on really has, and being able to measure that and not just rely on this like numerical factor of, oh, this person has 30 million followers, so it's going to work really well.